Welcome to the Players Ball Podcast for AT Aliens by AT Aliens. I'm your host, Alex the Great. I'm joined by my brother MB. Arigato gozaimasu, MB. How you living, big dog?
I'm doing well, man. No complaints.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know this, but last week I officially became famous, right? So the pod should skyrocket. We should hit the moon on the subbies here shortly. I was featured. I was called out by a local radio host, Carl Dukes. Put him up, see Dukes on the socials. They had put a poll on Twitter. Um, they wanted to give a grade of an overall grade of our current GM, Terry Fontenot. Um, you've been very vocal about Terry. Falcons fans have been even more vocal about Terry and their thoughts. And so the poll was saying, hey, what do you give him so far in his tenure? A, B, C, D, or worse than D, you got to do a comment. The overwhelming result was a C. But in my assessment, I gave a grade, and in my grade, I explained why I thought he deserved a B, which is what I gave him. You came back and said you got a C. I got called out on the radio. You didn't, so I'm more famous than you at this point. We're still brothers from another, but it was nice to get some love from the radio show, man. You can catch that clip on our socials on both the TikTok as well as IG. Uh, see what Mr. Dukes had to say about your boy. Very complimentary of my take. So I think that's where we start, man. Um, you gave Terry a C on his overall tenure.
C
How did you
plus.
arrive at that grade? C plus. You did say C
Um,
plus.
First, I want to take a step back. I had just hopped in the car, had just turned on the radio, was on my way to take. I don't remember where I was going, to be honest. Um, but I was in the car and I got the text message from you about the shout out on the radio, and I had just tuned into the segment, so I kind of knew what they were talking about, but I missed it live when Dukes was talking about what you said,
Hmm.
and I did not actually comment on the poll on X, so he had no opportunity to read my
Ah,
opinions. I was saving it for the loyal 100 or whatever we're gonna call the the players out there following the pod. So I think just listening to the segment, you and Carl were very alike in wanting to kind of give Terry a little more grace, whereas Mike Bell, man, he was going hard.
yeah.
He was thrashing that man. Uh, no grace whatsoever. And I feel like I kind of land somewhere in the middle. Like I said, I give him a C plus, and my reasoning for that is, he's done some good things. To your point, the signing Jesse Bates, outstanding player. I think the draft decisions, even though I disagree with the overall choice of drafting, purely offense and not taking some defensive talent in key positions. When they're not necessarily needs, right? Like we had Tyler Algier and we went for Bijan. Well, I
Hmm.
think that they're questionable picks. You can't argue that those players haven't stepped up and shown to be talented, and those players specifically being Drake London and Bijan Robinson. Now you still have room for judgment on Michael Penix, but he is showing flashes. He looks like he's gonna be the next, you know, franchise QB for us, right?
Hmm.
Then you have Kyle Pitts, who has been a complete abysmal draft pick, right? What were we joking about? Um, his number of touchdowns.
Yeah.
each year.
He's gonna have 5 this year, baby. He's on track.
So I would give him just overall hit and miss in terms of draft. He's probably missed more than he's hit. But when
What would
you
you grade him just draft exclusively, right? We said overall, split
D,
it into free agency and then draft. Okay. So averaging out, that puts him at what, like a B for free agency?
yeah, because you got Jesse Bates. Whether or not they panned out, I think the move to go get um uh Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon were the correct decisions. You know,
Mhm.
we needed that help. I think you look at uh Caden Ellis and some other kind of middle tier guys that have been um they've been productive for this team, right? Like they're not bona fide superstars, but they're productive in key positions. And you have to have a mix, right?
Yeah.
It's a large roster and you only have a finite amount of money. And then you have the Kirk debacle. And that one is tough because for 6 games, he was everything we wanted him to be, right? And then
Mhm.
he hasn't been. And the hardest pill to swallow when it comes to Kirk Cousins is the fact that he lost you a draft pick on the way in by kind of running his mouth about
Flapping them gums.
his
Yeah.
conversation with the medical staff. And then now you have all this, you know, was he injured? Was he not injured? I believe I heard on the radio it was either Terry or I think it was Terry who flat out said they had no idea he was hurt to the extent that he was hurt because he didn't tell them. Now I've seen arguments, you know, as far as defending Kirk in his actions, and the basis of that being when we drafted Michael Penix after signing Kirk Cousins, it was kind of a slap in the face to Kurt, and also he was blindsided by it, and um, he felt insecure in his position. I'm like, dude, you're a professional. You just got paid $180 million. Like, I don't care about your feelings when it comes to stuff like this. Like, this is a organization. We have to have a backup plan regardless of who you are. Um, but yeah, I think that the Kirk Cousins situation definitely is one of those that I don't know. In hindsight, and even before it happened, you and I didn't really feel great about it. When it happened, of course, we jumped on board, but I do think that is a bad look on Terry, right? Like that was a Terry Fontenot pick and move that I think is gonna jeopardize our future as a franchise.
Yeah, I mean, it's jeopardizing it right now. It shouldn't. The way he structured it, I actually give him points for it because it shouldn't sell us out for too long, right? Next year, we're going to have significantly more cap space, which in the Thomas Dimitrov era was not the case. We were leveraging it over and over and over to where we didn't have money for, 5, 6 years consecutively. So at least in this Kurt deal, which I will label like you a debacle, I will say he at least has that saving grace, right? The money's coming back. I want to circle back to the free agents that you mentioned. So Kirk, right? Darnell Mooney was a stud. Um, Another one that he signed was Nate Landman from the practice squad, and that was last year. Before that, there is a defensive end um, or defensive tackle that we signed to go along with Grady when Grady got hurt. I think he's a star. David Onyemata. So that was a good signing under Terry. His free agency, I actually give um, a B. Right, my overall grade is a B, so that means my draft I also give that a B. But the draft is pretty good too, man. Like I don't know if you heard, I heard on the radio today that Drew Dahlman is likely going to command almost $20 million in free agency, and he likely won't come back to the Falcons, right? So that's somebody he drafted. Um,
Yeah, I mean he
he
was.
drafted Drew. It's a perfect storm of timing versus availability in this year's draft and all that. But he drafted him. He's gonna be good. I know you're not a Richie Grant fan. He was in that Kyle Pitts draft though. Richie was serviceable for a couple years. Troy Anderson has been talented, although hurt frequently. Talented. We got Tyler Algier that same draft. Drake London, Arnold Ebiketie. Still leave a little bit to be desired, but serviceable player. Bijan is a Pro Bowler. Matthew Bergeron is borderline Pro Bowler. Zach Harrison shows some flashes. I actually really like Clark Phillips. I think his draft in 2003 20 2023 was really solid. Um, we had 6 picks. 4 of those picks are still playing. One of them's a Pro Bowler, and 2 of them look like they're going to be really good for a while. And then with last year, essentially no one played, right? You had some people get a little run, like JD Bertrand, but he's a fifth rounder. Um, Casey Washington got a little bit, when when we started to have some wide receiver injury woes, but Rukaroro, Braylon Trice, Brandon Dorless, those were our picks that did not really see the field. And I think that leaves for an opportunity for them to still be really good and be contributors.
It does, but as it stands right now, you can't look at that in a positive light, right? Like
Can
you
you look at it in a negative light?
absolutely because they didn't contribute, and you need your first three picks, if not your first four, to contribute. If you look at the teams that win, they get contribution from their draft picks immediately, and we're
Name a team that's not the Philadelphia Eagles that you can give that attestment to.
there are several rookies, and you put me on the spot, but
I
Detroit
did that
had
because there's
several
Detroit
rookies
has some good
that
rookies.
showed out that were available. Terry and Arnold. You look at
Jameer Gibbs. He was last year, but somebody that drafted that contributed immediately.
the defensive ends that we were in the conversation for last year, contributed immediately last year.
For
Um,
Detroit?
no, just in general. There was one for Minnesota. There's one for the Rams.
Well, hold on. Let me circle back to my question because I was saying more along the lines of what I understood you to be getting at is that teams build through the draft. The Philadelphia Eagles have been built through the draft, right? If anything, we have a very strong parallel to them. They went. Let me break it down before you assault me. Um, they went Jalen, right? They got a quarterback. Then they got a wide receiver and Devontae Smith. Then they brought in a wide receiver, and AJ
Brown.
Brown. Um, they tried to draft a running back. We drafted a running back successfully. And they did all that on offense before they started assembling their defense. Now they had some defensive players already in the mix, like some Brandon Grahams, Fletcher Cox, that were able to sustain them. But then they started drafting their defense, so they definitely went offense first. We've gone offense. We don't need any more offense. Maybe offensive line, but now we can settle upon our defense. Philadelphia has done it right, not just because they drafted dogs. That's a big part of it, but I don't think there's many other teams that can say they've had that level of success in the draft. Philly has killed it. I'll give it to them. Right. No one else
Washington.
really has, man.
The Redskins
They
were
were
built
built. They
through
were
the
built
draft.
through free agency.
Name the free agents.
Bobby Wagner, Austin Eckler, um, I don't know too many other.
Jaden Daniels, Scary Terry were both draft picks.
Right.
Um,
So
yeah,
we're 2 for 2. 2 and 2.
but I think to be clear, it has to be a combination, right? Like all teams are a
Hmm.
combination of draft picks and free agent acquisitions and trades, right?
Right.
Um, to circle back to the parallel you tried to make with the Eagles, their defense was established before they went down that offense route, and then they circled back to defense. But that defense was already well established before when they were drafting Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith. They were still a playoff contender. We haven't been a playoff contender in quite some
Yeah. So
time.
we have a different starting place, right? And we haven't been a playoff contender, likely because we don't have the defense that Philly had. We're having to build on both sides of the ball. They had to build on one side of the ball and then refresh on the other side.
So this is the thing that I heard recently, and it makes a lot of sense. What the Falcons tried to do was, by and large, draft offense and build the defense through free agency. And it hasn't worked.
Right.
And I think that falls, right or wrong, on Terry.
100%.
And I think the mistake is not having more balance in the selections, right? Like you need a mixture of both, and you need high end guys on both sides. You can't just first round draft pick offensive, specialist year in and year out and expect to hit on, late round studs on defense. Like that, it happens. Grady is a great example, but I think you need more balance. And that's where I guess some of my criticism is like, although I love Bijan Robinson and I know what he brings to this team, you had 1,000-yard rusher in Tyler Algier that you drafted a year or two before, and instead of going defense, you chose another running back, which we already had a very serviceable. Now you and I have gone and reviewed the draft, and I don't know that there was the correct decision to be made in terms of defenders at that point. But then, Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts could have been a number of stud defenders that we have in this league right now.
Said another way, the Bijan Robinson pick was the right pick. Kyle
But
Pitts, on the
I,
other hand, was not.
I
Based on where we were picking and the defensive players that were available,
but what you're
Bijan was the right pick.
but what you've said to me, and this is always true, like hindsight's 2020. At the
Hmm.
time, we still lacked the defensive talent. And there were defensive talent projected that we could have gone with instead of Bijan. But we
Bijan
chose
looks to be a generational back. I'm never
absolutely.
gonna fault that pick, even if you have a 1,000-yard receiver. If we had Drake London, but Marvin Harrison Jr. falls to us, you draft him, right? Um, there's nobody that's that good at quarterback to draft over Michael Penix Jr., right? But look at what the Cardinals did a couple years ago. They had one Josh. They drafted the next Josh, who's with the Vikings now. I think he's a free agent. And then the very next year, they drafted Kyler Murray, right? If you can upgrade the position, you do it. If you have now a couple of those, I think Kyler was better than both of the Joshes, but
The other
if you have the opportunity
Joshes
to draft
have been massive failures and are
or
backups.
Darnold, I'm sorry, not Josh. It was one of them was a Josh, the other was Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold has
Sam Darnold was not
somewhat
drafted
reclaimed his career.
by the Arizona Cardinals.
100% he was.
I will put two juice box on Sam Darnold not being drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. It was
This is the Jets.
it was Josh Rosen who they drafted
Josh Rosen
the
was one of the
year
Joshes.
before Kyler Murray, and he was an absolute failure
Hmm.
and remains to be a failure. So turning
Yeah,
around and spending a first round draft pick on Kyler Murray is 100% understandable. You had 1,000-yard rusher in Tyler Algier, who may not be on this team come next year due to the salary cap implications that we have now. But
he. No disrespect to Tyler.
he's no Bijan.
He will.
I
He will not
understand
be
that.
missed.
And in hindsight, yes, absolutely, the Bijan pick panned out. But you still have gaping holes in a position group that you haven't prioritized. And you have instead prioritized positions where we have more than serviceable talent. And that's my point.
We don't have another one. We had to sign another wide receiver because we didn't have anybody but Drake London. Right. Kyle Pitts. I mean, everyone was sold on the pick when we made it.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Can't have hindsight but one, but ignore it for the other.
I,
Pick a side, brother.
I don't I didn't like Kyle Pitts at 4. I still am holding out hope that he pans out just because he was number 4.
No, you are not. You already bashed that man this evening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't I think this is the last year we see him if he's not traded. He plays this last year of his contract and he's going to bounce around the league.
That's different than having high hopes, Matty.
I still have hopes that he proves us all wrong this year, right? Because
You
we
already decreased. You said high hopes, now you got hopes. Now he's signed, he's gonna be around. He may bounce around the league.
poor choice of words. High
No,
high
you
hopes.
you used the words you wanted to use and you used them accurately is what I would say.
I would like to see Kyle Pitts excel. But to this point, he's been an absolute failure, especially for a fourth overall pick.
Yes.
And in that draft, you had generational defensive talent that you chose Kyle Pitts over.
Hmm. He was supposed to be the unicorn, man. That's what they were saying.
Yeah. I mean, Tack McKinley was supposed to be good. Vic Beasley was supposed to be good. I mean,
Those were not on Terry. We're talking about Terry.
I know, but my point is they're always supposed to be good when you pick them. They don't all pan out.
I
But
knew who Vic Beasley was. I didn't know who Tack McKinley was when we picked him. I knew who Bijan Robinson was when we picked him. I didn't
just
know who Drake London was. So
just just because you know them doesn't mean they're going to be good.
if I know them, generally it means they're gonna be good because I paid less attention to college football. I'm only hearing about the stars. In all honesty, right?
Yeah, but the stars don't always pan out when they make the transition into the league.
They don't. They don't. But for the most part, if I don't hear about you, you're an under the radar player. And that's not to say that you won't have success in the league, because Dallas defensive, well, what is he,
Micah
an edge?
Parsons?
Yeah, had no idea about Micah
Oh,
Parsons.
Micah was highly rated coming out of college. His college tape is absolutely insane.
What pick did he go?
I don't know. He was probably in the top 3 defensive ends in his class, though. I think uh, TJ Watt or the one of the Bosas was probably in there with him.
I want to find it, but I don't want to waste too much time.
But
He was picked 12th.
yeah,
I don't see the other ones though. 2021 draft is what it was, but circling back to Terry, I mean the picks that he's had, I think have been good for the most part. He's missed on some, and we're gonna have to agree to disagree on the 2024 draft, right? I think if you haven't seen the field yet, I can't call you a failure. It's one thing if you see the field and fail, right? It's a whole nother thing, like a Zach Wilson.
we've
No
talked about it
no
though.
disrespect to that man, but
Your 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 best ability is your availability. If you're not available,
I think you get a pass as an incoming rookie, right? Like, do you give up on Blake Griffin because he didn't play his first year? Hell no, he's a future Hall of Famer. It's NFL players that have done that same thing. I just can't name them off the top of my head. If you haven't played yet, your NFL career hasn't started. Their career hasn't started, so I can't write them off yet. I think they're an open book, making them ungradable for me.
Micah was the third defensive player taken in that draft. The first two were J.C. Horn and PS2.
Mm,
And the first defensive end was taken at 18, and that was Jalen Phillips. The next defensive end was Quiddy Pay.
who's that? Quiddy Pay.
Yeah, he played for the Colts. He was supposed to be good and just didn't pan out. A lot of these defensive ends didn't. Um, Defensive tackle Christian Barmore, I think, is the only name. Greg Russo has had an okay career.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, by and large,
This is a weak draft, man.
yeah. I mean,
Kyle Pitts should have been. He should have went fourth. He went behind the quarterbacks,
I don't
ahead
know.
of
He went.
Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle
That
and
looks.
Penei Sewell. Those are really good players. But if you think he's a generational talent at tight end, and you know how Matt loves tight ends, you get him right.
I think
Matty Ice, not Embiid.
picking Kyle Pitts over Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell, PS2, Devonta Smith, and Michael Parsons all looks really, really bad.
That's
Now,
hindsight though.
hindsight is
Even
2020.
even Justin Fields looks bad. Like you could have brought him in and he sit under Matt's tutelage for a while, right?
I think it still remains to be seen what Justin Fields will be in the NFL, right? He's had a putrid career in Chicago. He didn't I mean he had a good start to the year last year in um Steel City, but
It was okay.
it was just that. It was just okay, right?
The record was good,
The
right? He
record was
didn't
good.
lose them any game, but he
His
didn't win them any
performance
either.
was middle of the road.
Average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see what they choose to do between him and Russ, but it's really the defensive players that I've been speaking on because that's where we've been hurting the most for the last 5 years, right? Like we haven't had a good defense. You know, what was the defensive coordinator under Mike Smith? Dean Pease. Dean Pease put
Oh,
together a fantastic for the players that we had. They outperformed their.
we did more with less under Dean Pease.
We
And
did
that's another reason why I think Terry thought he could go after offense while we had the time because he did more with less, right? That's what he was doing. He put that together. So we took a step back with Jimmy Lake, who's since been rehired by the Rams, but
a huge step back with Jimmy Lake.
huge step back. But Dean Pease has been gone 2 years, right? Who did we have before him that left for the Saints, I believe?
I
Dave. I don't know. We did more with less though,
with Dean
and
Pease.
with Dean Pease. Yes.
Yes. But either way, it remains a huge
Oh, it
gap.
was Ryan Nielsen.
Oh yeah. Brian Nielsen didn't do very good
He
as
got a
a.
head coaching job out of that, didn't
That doesn't mean he did good as a defensive coordinator.
he? Yeah, it does. You don't hire somebody. You don't hire bums.
Sometimes it's not about what you know, it's who you know.
You think the Roonies were played, right? Like,
I mean, he's in New Orleans,
all
right?
I say is, look, we last year we drafted. We had what, one, two, three. We had 8 picks, and 5 of them were defensive. Those 5 defensive players haven't seen the field. I think they will. Um, do I think we need to draft defense this year? Yes, but I don't know if. Okay, so let's talk about that. Where do you draft then? So how can he right his woes? What does he need to draft this year? Is there a position that if he doesn't draft it? I know we talked about this a little bit last week. But let's talk about it
Defensive line, defensive
again.
back. He has to go.
You are open to a defensive back.
I am. My personal preference would be to sign a defensive back and draft a defensive lineman and also sign a defensive lineman.
Mm.
I don't know that we have the money
Edge.
to do either of those.
No, I don't. I don't know what we do.
But that would be my preference.
So I've heard, and you mentioned Mike Green is the guy. We watched this clip before we started the pod. He just destroyed that old lineman,
I'll be
treated him like
honest.
a child.
Until the Senior Bowl, I had no idea who Mike Green was.
I don't imagine you catching a whole lot of Marshall games. What division do they even play in?
I mean, they're Division One, but I couldn't tell you what
No, not
conference.
division, conference. That's what I meant.
I don't know. Um, the only players I know out of Marshall were was it Randy Moss,
No.
To? No, To was out of Chattanooga.
Yeah, they both went to
Um,
really small schools.
one of them went to where? Where did Randy go? I swear it was Marshall.
Um, Florida State.
No,
It says Florida State and then Marshall.
College Marshall. Like I said, Randy
Oh, oh
Moss.
for 2. Goodness gracious. Good to go, Marcus.
Yeah, so I don't know how I feel about a Mike Green. I mean, he had 17 sacks at Marshall, but I don't know what kind of competition he played against. Now, to his credit, that clip from the Senior Bowl was against an Oregon offensive lineman. I don't know much about Oregon's individual personnel, but I know Dan Lanning, and I know he is building a top tier program, out west. So I will say that does bode in his favor. One of the other names that I've heard, might be available and a lot of discussion about, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. I heard a discussion on the radio, but it was regarding Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. He's a defensive tackle, so an interior guy, and just the consensus kind of from Dukes and Bell were he didn't do enough at A&M for to warrant being discussed highly. And what they were worried about is every year you have these guys that they didn't put much on tape, but they go to the combine and they just are physical freaks, right?
Yeah.
And they convince someone to draft them high, a la Anthony Richardson, and then they're just complete bums. And so they had Brian McFadden on, and they asked Brian his opinion. I thought what he said was pretty interesting, and he was actually in favor of Shamar Stewart. And his reasoning was he felt the reason for the lack, I hate using that word, but the reason that he didn't just pop off the tape was more about the scheme that they were running at A&M than it was the player itself and what they're asking him to do. And I kind of parallel it to Matthew Judon, right? You and I both questioned consistently why Jimmy Lake used Matthew Judon in the way that he used him and basically neutralizing him as a pass rush threat. And so I thought that was interesting. I wanted to get your take.
I'm with Deuce and Bell. I don't want nobody that hasn't. It's one thing to not have this to the statistics. It's another thing to not have any of the tape either. Um, I didn't watch any Texas A&M games, so I wouldn't have seen them either way. But there are other edge rushers in the mix that I would want to consider. The other thing that I would say there is like, I know we traded up for Rook.
Yeah,
Um,
which was a huge reach.
well, hopefully it wasn't, is what I say to that. And I say that because if he can become what we think Shamar Stewart is, as far as a defensive tackle that maybe can get to the edge periodically, we don't need him,
I
right?
don't
I would rather have a pure edge player.
I don't think you want a defensive tackle that can get to the edge. I think you want a defensive tackle that can push the middle of the pocket. What you don't want is a quarterback that can step up and step through the pocket, right? Like your defensive tackle's job is to collapse from the center and push them outside, and then your edge guys are there to clean it up. That and run defense, right? Like not
Hmm.
allowing center penetration. And that was a huge problem for the Falcons last year was our run defense.
So what I heard them say on the radio was, right, you could use him and he'd be the last down lineman, right? He wouldn't be the most outside man. You would have an edge or a linebacker covering him on the outside, but he has the tools, Shamar Stewart, to be a defensive tackle or be a defensive tackle on the end, right? And I think that is what they were saying about Ruka is that he could do that same thing. So in that interest, I would want a
A
pure
pure
edge
edge.
rusher.
So
Yes.
then, you know, we live in Georgia. We have a really big program, just
Do we? What's big college
northeast.
program here?
Huge. Um Hard to miss unless you live under a rock. And if you do, to each their own.
Till
Um
Patrick Star, we said what's happening.
yeah. I think there's a lot of recency bias. We've talked about the Philadelphia Eagles. They're kind of like the model defense, right, for the league, and all those Georgia guys. And it's hard not to see what those guys did in the Super Bowl and in the last couple of years as they came into the league. And something the Falcons haven't done a lot of, and they've taken a lot of criticism for, from me included, is looking over the guys that are here already and not drafting them. And so that's come up a lot in this offseason with the needs and, the Super Bowl being really, really recent. So a lot of talk has been made over Michael Williams, Malachi Starks, Jalen Walker, and their potential to be a fit for our team. And I want to talk specifically about Michael Williams because he is the most interesting of the three because he is a guy who's extremely versatile. I don't know that I would call him a pure edge rusher. He's more of a true outside linebacker who can rush. He's
Mm.
good in coverage. He's fast, long, and I think he would be a good fit for this team. But it sounds like, from your assessment, that isn't necessarily a direction that you're interested in going in. simply for the fact that he's not like a pure edge guy. And I think he's compared to guys like Micah Parsons. And I don't think that's a fair comparison because I don't think he's that physically dominant.
Yeah, that's his player comparison, Michael Parsons.
I believe so.
I mean, if that's his player comparison.
It's either him or Jalen that gets that player comparison.
If that's his player comparison, I'll definitely reconsider. Right. He gets extra looks, even if he can't. I mean, that's a high bar, right? Um, but even if he's a poor man's Micah Parsons, for a year or two before he elevates, man, that would be fantastic. Micah Parsons is an absolute dog.
All right, so this NFL.com has his player comparison as Greg Russo, which we
The
very
Bills guy?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh
I
no, man.
I think it's Jalen Walker that gets the Micah Parsons comparisons. Oh, he also gets Nolan Smith comparisons. They also call Jalen Walker kind of a tweener. Um,
So on the mock draft I'm looking at, he is an edge. Jalen Walker.
but both Michael and Jalen were asked to do a lot in college in coverage and did well covering, running backs, tight ends, slot, as well as rush the passer.
Michael Williams shown as an edge as well.
Yeah.
So is Mike Green. Shamar Stewart is D line.
Yeah, D tackle.
The other no, it just says DL.
Mm.
Which, uh,
But I want to go back to the original question and like, how do you feel about it? Like, is it a circumstance where because it's a Georgia player, there's a bias or a propensity to just want to slide him in there and say that will fix what we need, or do you look at it more objectively and say, how do their skills fit? And I don't know that they're a Nolan Smith or a Jalen Carter or a Jordan Davis or N'Kobe Dean. Like those guys were on another level.
mhm.
I don't know that either Jalen or Michael pop off on film the way that those guys did. Now Jalen had some games where he just completely showed out on tape. Texas being one of them.
I think he said on his interview that that was the first game he was able to practice for. Right, he was dealing with injuries the entire season, so he said, I think he said 70%. He was
Mm.
at 70% most of the season, which he may be overselling his injury at that point. Right. I don't know if you're 70% and play the entire season, or he might have missed a game. Didn't he miss like the Clemson game or something?
I think he missed early on, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, knowing that he wasn't 100%, I think there's that allows room to dream as well. I wouldn't be mad at taking the Georgia player. I don't know enough about any of these guys to be mad. Right. The other one that comes up is James Pierce Jr. Right. I don't know enough about him either.
Which I've talked about James Pierce before.
You
He's
have.
he's another athletic freak. He ran a 4.47 40.
Yikes.
So blazing speed. I his junior or sophomore tape, not last year but the year before, he had better film than his last year at Tennessee, and I think part of that was the hype, NIL, all the accolades and the expectations. Sometimes I don't know if it's conscious or unconscious, but sometimes it doesn't pan out the way that you expect it to, given previous seasons. especially
Yeah.
in this day and age. And I'm never gonna sit here and say a player is, taking it, easy to preserve themselves for the NFL, but you never know if that, happens subconsciously, right? Because you're clearly thinking to some degree about what's next instead of what you have in front of you. Whether you
And maybe that could happen mid-season too, right? Like Tennessee was in the fight for a while, and then they,
they made the
lost a
playoffs.
couple of games. They did make the playoffs.
Oh yeah, and then they got absolutely embarrassed by Ohio State.
Ohio State, yeah, they had to travel up north, right, to the shoe.
Yeah.
Well, that defeats my argument. I was gonna say, once they're out of the fight, maybe start taking plays off, but they didn't. They didn't. They weren't out of the fight.
It's also, teams could be game planning and scheming specifically for him, right? Like there's
Yeah.
all kinds of factors that go into it, but I did not feel like he had as good of a year as everyone expected him to have, but he's still, you know, an outstanding player. I wouldn't be mad if we took him either.
Would you be mad if we drafted Malachi Starks at 15?
No, I wouldn't, but part of me feels like that would be a reach. I feel like if you're going to go Malachi, you trade back into the 20s.
We
And
know that's a lot easier said than done.
I know
This draft has him going to. I give you one guess.
the
The
Philadelphia
Philadelphia
Eagles.
Eagles. Yeah. What a nightmare that would be. We should draft him just so that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Now there is a Philadelphia player, former Philadelphia. I guess he's current, but he's expected to be a former Philadelphia Eagle that does have a tie to the state. He's a local. I believe they gave him the key to the city after this last Super Bowl um, victory, and the city being Brunswick, Georgia, out there in the coast. But that's
Okay.
Darius Slay. Uh, it looks like he's going to be available. You asked earlier about drafting or signing uh, defensive backs. I definitely think we need a second corner. I think Darius Slay would be a good addition if we could afford him. I don't know that we
That's
can.
the if. Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's a big if. And I don't see a whole lot of corners in the draft. Oh, Will Johnson. He's top 10. It's one, two. See who's top 10 of these next ones. Who do you
there's
pick? If it's up to you and being realistic, right? Like we're not going to get as Travis Hunter. You know what I mean?
no. And I don't know that I would want Travis Hunter, although I do think it's interesting he's going as a corner. I did. I
I
mean,
would.
I would
What?
take him.
you, you
I would take him.
insane. Dog. We have need. He could be the other DB that you're talking about, and he could also slot in their wide receiver.
Yeah, no,
You
I would
know?
take him. What I guess I meant to say was like he's out. He's so far out of the realm of possibilities that I'm not even
Okay.
thinking about him. Not that I
Yeah.
wouldn't take
Okay.
him. I'm not thinking about him.
Got it. Got it.
I don't know. I would go Jalen Walker if he was available. That's just me.
Okay.
But that's also my regional bias, right? And I try to be objective. It's impossible. The Georgia Bulldog at heart, wants to see some dogs tear it up for the home team.
Yeah. Yeah. First rounders, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Now, if we took Brock Bowers at 4 instead of Kyle Pitts,
Cal Pitts.
no one would be complaining.
Yeah, because he balled out. He broke all of the records that Kyle Pitts had set.
And he was drafted way later.
He was. He was drafted way later.
Uh, but man, we've talked about the Falcons for nearly an hour. So we did have a few other topics. Do you want to wrap it up?
Um, there was some news that I wanted to get your thoughts on. Debo Samuel is now a commander. Um, they're taking on his full salary, but he was traded for a fifth round pick.
Yep.
Uh, what is there a move out there for us, man? Like, does that for me that gave me a little bit of hope. Um,
And
that
what
we can solve some of these needs. Right, we're gonna have to use, I think, the majority of our picks. What do we lose? A fourth?
I'm not
Top
sure.
three we got. I think top three we got to use. But if we could trade a fifth to plug some of our our holes, pause. That would be dope. Like they got Debo Samuel, top 10 wide receiver in the league. I know he's had some injury woes, but when he's on the field, he is an absolute X factor. For a fifth round pick, that was crazy, man. For me, that gave me a little bit of hope.
Yeah, I think it's a unique situation though because San Francisco is staring at an impending contract extension for Brock Purdy, in which the going rate for a quarterback is 40-50 million dollars a year.
He
So
know he ain't getting that.
we'll see.
No, Brock's not getting that from anybody.
We'll see. You don't want to take a third L today. Um,
Now I need a L. Now I need a win. No, there's no way, bro.
he gets 40 plus, I guarantee it.
What's the average? What's the franchise tag for a quarterback right now? What's the average?
I don't know, but they just franchise tagged T Higgins for 26 million.
But he's not a quarterback. If the franchise tag will put him at 40, then sure, they give Brock Purdy 40. If it doesn't, then no way. He's not that good.
I don't disagree with you, but
If it's that's exactly what I'm saying. If it's the result of the going rate of a quarterback that he gets 40, sure. I don't think San Francisco giving him that.
I'm gonna see if I can find it. The transition tag QB for 2025 is 40.2.
Okay, so yeah, he'll get that from somebody. But there's also a lot of serviceable quarterbacks
Oh,
that
I'm
are going to be
sorry.
free
The
agents. Sam Darnold,
franchise tag is 40.2. The transition tag is 35.
I don't know the difference.
I don't either, but
Fair.
in 2026, the figures are 51.2 and 42.9. That's the projected. But yeah, he'll get 40 just if they tag him.
You got Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron's washed.
He is, but
He's gonna get it.
nah, I guess Brock Purdy is better than him at this point.
So, let me ask you this: when you look at that trade and the compensation given up, are you thinking about us going out and trading for someone, or does that give you hope in the Kirk Cousins situation?
Not Kirk specifically. I was thinking either we can trade and get a piece, right? Like a good cornerback, for instance, um, or maybe a defensive lineman for a later round pick. Or, maybe we can get a player off for a better pick, right? Like a Kyle Pitts for a third or a second, you know?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know
just
that
that
we're gonna get a
exchange, I think
third
that's
or a
possible.
second for Kyle at this point in his career.
Hey man, if they believe like you do, they'll give up them goods.
I need his value to go up just so that card that I got with his signature on it can go up in value.
Say he balls out his first 6 games of the season, gets all 5 of his touchdowns that he's gonna make for 2025. Are you okay with trading him then because his value is high? Or do you want to then keep him and re-sign him?
I think at this point I guess it depends on how ballin is ballin, because not to transition because I don't think we're gonna hit any other topics tonight, but
Yeah.
I just saw DeAndre Hunter put up big numbers last night in a Cleveland Cavaliers victory, and it's that same situation, right? Like he was having a solid year. We traded him away while his value was probably at the peak that it was going to be, and
Hmm.
he's still balling. And it's like, do we miss it on our team? Probably.
I still trade DeAndre though. I just try to get a first round pick. Right. The issue with DeAndre is the return. We got players. All those players are playing and they seem serviceable, but we needed some draft capital.
Yeah. So what's your take on Kyle? You
Oh, I'm
trade
trading.
him as soon as his value is up,
I've seen enough.
the pump
Yeah.
and dump.
Pump and dump. Let him ride.
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad at that. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting. I don't know when the first day of the league year begins, but you're already starting to see some moves happen with some re-signs, some trades. Obviously, free agency won't be open until the league year starts,
Hmm.
but some restructures and other moves can can go down. It looks like we may release David Onyemata. We could release Grady. I think the expectation is that we'll restructure Grady, but he could be a cap casualty um,
Is that just a legacy play?
to re-sign him.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's a Arthur Blank loyalty play.
Yeah.
Um, Now
I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but
Grady has
that's
been
what it
a
feels like.
fantastic Falcon. He's represented the city well. Um, if he could retire a Falcon, I'd be happy. But I'm also with you that restructures have to make sense, and I don't want to keep just passing the buck. But we got
Yeah.
Grady, we got um, Jake Matthews, and Caleb McGarry that are restructure targets, and I would
Hmm.
expect that we're gonna have to restructure some, if not all three of them, just to be able to sign a draft class.
Hmm.
And we're gonna see some cap casualties. I would expect David Onyemata to be a potential one of those. I don't like it, but I think um we may release Kirk because he has a $10 million roster bonus that would be due if, or it becomes part of his guarantees if he's on the roster by a certain date. So you save $10 million by cutting him. You're still going to take a
Hmm.
massive hit, but between this year and next year, you save $10 million. And I don't know any backup QB that you're not going to be able to sign for, you know, a fifth of that. So you save 10, you spend two of it to sign a backup. The rest of it gets you a little bit over, like a little bit under the cap, and then whatever restructure deals and other cap casualties or what you have to spend in free agency and signing your draftees. So as much as I dislike that sunk cost, I think is gonna happen, just out of that pure sake of we're in debt right now. We got to get even. If we actually got to get some money because we got to move forward, right?
But Terry said at the combine that he's comfortable keeping him.
I know that's what he
I'm
said.
comfortable keeping him. I know I'm comfortable keeping him too. You think that was just lip service?
I think that was lip service, and I'm comfortable keeping him. I don't think we'll keep him.
Mm.
I think this lip service. I think they'll use, like I said, that $10 million savings in that roster bonus.
Because you know who's on that quarterback free agency list, man?
Dez going back to
Marcus Mariota.
oh, so is Desmond Ritter. We can.
Yeah.
Get those two
I would
guys.
much prefer to pay $10 million or sacrifice $10 million to have Kirk Cousins on this roster with Michael Penix than anyone that's not going to help him continue to grow. Right? I don't know that he needs that. Right? He had
Do you
some of the most snaps played in college by a quarterback. He played a lot and was very good. But I just think having iron sharpens iron.
do you think a
You can't put no
disgruntled
damn.
Kurt? I mean,
Yes, I do think he still helps Michael Penix.
in the
He he's not a monster. He covered up the logo, and I don't think the point that you made earlier in the pod about there was rumors that he was hurt that they drafted Michael Penix, and that's why he dropped the information about talking to the Falcon staff, and we lost the pick. I don't see him doing that, man.
no, that wasn't the point that I was making. I was saying that there's belief that he hid his injury because he was insecure about his job because of the Michael Penix pick.
You're talking about during season he hit his injury. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and then he came out afterward.
He
Gotcha.
came out
Okay,
afterwards because he wants
a job.
leverage. Yeah, he wants to be the starting quarterback for another franchise,
Right.
which I think would be wild to see Kirk go to like the Jets and suck it up in New York because it's the Jets.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't know. You know, he says a lot of the right things in the media most of the time, but you ran your gums to start off this relationship that hurt us. You didn't disclose your injury, so they say, which hurt us. And then you go on NFL Network during Super Bowl week and make all of these allegations, which has the potential to hurt us. And it's like, I don't, the guy we saw on QB,
Is
and
still the guy. Is
is
my
it
point.
or is it a front?
Nah, he seems like the guy. The man did. He still did an interview at the Waffle House, with his
The
kids.
guy who
He still
won't,
had genuine joy on his face, swag surfing. I don't think he was selling us a lie on who he is. Now, he is trying to play, he's making moves to get his way out of Atlanta. But, you don't got to bend to his will. If he's around, I think he plays ball and he helps Michael Penix
the
out.
guy who wouldn't talk to Dio Orlando Ledbetter that stuck his guards on D Led.
Another move to
Sheepish.
influence his move out of the city.
He's a wolf in sheep's clothing, man.
There's nothing wolf about Kirk.
I will agree to
If
disagree.
anything, he's a wolf in the wolf's clothing. I don't think he's disguising himself. I think he is who he is. These more recent moves are playing to get him out of Atlanta. He wants to be released, but I don't think you don't have to give that to him.
You don't.
And if you don't, I think he's the type of person that sticks around and he plays ball. You know,
So I want to end on this because we are over an hour. We've been talking about the birds for an hour. Um, one of the points that I saw was that um, I lost it.
Kirk being released.
Okay, so if Kurt sits on the bench for an entire season, let's just say he sits behind Michael Penix, the probability of him getting a starting quarterback job in going into 2026 diminishes greatly. If he goes now, he has a better chance of getting another starting opportunity. And then what happens after that just will depend on how well he plays. But if he sits behind Penix for a whole year, the thought is his career as a starting quarterback in the NFL is basically over at his age.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
And
But
would he
to me,
be
that means that gives us leverage. right? If he wants to start, then all right, let us trade you because
But
he has a no trade clause.
it also would give reason for resentment and potentially foster ill will in the locker room, and he may not be a good teammate to
I
Michael
just don't
Penix.
see that. I don't see. I think you can have ill will towards management and know that the players around you, your brothers in arms, did not make that decision, right? He just does not seem the type of player to me that's gonna be petty Betty in the locker room with the guys because management made a certain decision.
It's,
I don't see it, and I don't know him well enough to call it one way or the other. But if I'm leaning that way. I think he's still gonna be a good teammate. They've said as much, right? Bijan has said something this offseason about Kirk. Um, still continuing to have conversation and being a good teammate.
yeah, I mean, it's hard. I tend to agree with you when it comes to Kirk Cousins, but it's hard to deny what we are seeing with him, not representing the Falcons organization, uh, saying what he said publicly, not taking interviews, not willing to stand on business and own it, right? Like, I don't mind you doing what you need to do, but own it. Don't hide behind your security. Don't be petty and take off the logo that you were just wearing representing the team, right? He was representing the team at the function and immediately decided to change. Like, that's
It was once
petty.
that event was over.
That's petty.
It's a strategic move towards management. If I'm a teammate, if I'm a player that has played with him and I know him well, I'm sure I can discern what he was doing and not be offended.
Yeah, we'll see what the organization does. I don't think he remains on the roster for many reasons, but honestly, like I said, I would not be mad if he does. I just there is certain reason to pause, and I think some people's concerns are potentially legitimate, right? Like, there's enough evidence to come to that conclusion rationally. Either way, right? Like, he could be a consummate professional and an amazing teammate if he has to stay as QB2 next year, or he could be, a snake.
Trevor Bauer.
Trevor's a fantastic teammate.
Nah, yeah, I still sign Trevor Bauer too. Yeah, no, we will see how it plays out, man. Best wishes to the Falcons.
Yeah.
Get it right.
So just before we sign out, do you want to rifle through some of these topics, or do you want to just leave it, let it go, leave it for next
Nah,
week?
we'll be all birds, man. We'll leave the people here, and we don't want to talk about any of those other things anyway. They're dreadful, not good news stuff. Maybe we'll have better things to say about those teams next week.
I still have very high hopes for the Atlanta United. They did continue their road woes, but
You are diving into the topic.
I'm just gonna say that is not as dreadful as the other two, and we'll leave it at that.
Well, the Braves injury woes have started again, and the Hawks kind of suck. But now, you know,
Hey,
we'll we'll call it.
last note: at least we're not the Mavs.
Oh man, what a dumpster fire that is.
I,
We can definitely end it on that. We are not the Dallas Mavericks. We are not fumbling that bad.
and I will say, none of our front offices are as delusional as the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, that's crazy. It feels like we're leaving them.
On
Go
a
read about it. They obviously they traded Luka, but they also have doubled their season ticket holder prices, and increased their regular season games by 8% in price. Idiots.
People are protesting not going to the games, and what are we going to do in return? We're going to up the price of entry.
Yeah,
Makes a lot of business sense.
she is trying to get that team to Vegas, man. We're gonna see. She's gonna make that happen. She's gonna just tank the whole thing until they're like, all right, go to Vegas.
Yeah.
Dallas fans gonna be mad then. Like, oh, we didn't really mean it. Come back.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see what shakes out.
All right, man. Well, it's been an interesting one. Definitely had a lot more to say about the Falcons than I anticipated. Um, we'll have to see how it shakes out this offseason because I think this is an important one for us as a franchise. We have hit some setbacks, but how far does it set us back? Do we lose a year, or do we keep on pushing and push through it and get to where we need to be? Because it's playoffs or bust, I think, for the current regime.
Agree. Yeah. We shall see.
Appreciate everyone listening. Don't forget, like, subscribe, hit us on the Insta, TikTok. We're gonna keep pumping out podcasts every Friday morning at 6 a.m. You can find our latest episode, and we're gonna do some work on trying to get some additional content posted for those other two socials. So,
Got
everyone,
it.
appreciate it. Peace.
Peace.